Welcome back, everybody, to the Fierce and Flowing podcast. I'm Monique Renee. And as per usual, I have another amazing guest today, and I'm so excited to dive into her story. I will introduce you in just a couple of seconds to Janice Goodwin. One of the things that I love about my podcast is that I get to bring people into the podcast who I've either had relationships with for a very long time. We have a history of working together, maybe going to school growing up. And Janice and I recently met at a women's empowerment group called the Loud Network. And we have become friends, and we're learning more and more about each other every time that we gather at this beautiful community. And I'm excited that she is going to share her fierce story with all of us today. So, welcome, Janice. So
Thank you
nice to
so
have you
much.
here.
I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you for making the time. And I have found that these stories are are so sometimes so simple but so powerful, and that the right person listens to the right story at the
Exactly.
right time. And it's usually just, one sentence, one paragraph, one word that can really make a difference. And
Yeah.
and that's why I do this podcast, because I never
Mhm.
know who is going to light up and who's going to make a shift in their life for the
Yeah.
better. And
Hmm.
and that's what keeps me going,
Hmm.
3 years later.
Right.
So everybody, Janice is an empowerment coach who encourages and sometimes challenges women to envision, create, and live the life of their dreams. So I love that. It's simple, and it's so powerful. As you and I both know, we're coaches. We've been through coaching before. We know how powerful it is.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you choose to jump into this profession now at this time in your life? And how long have you been doing this coaching and empowerment?
What I want to say is that it chose me,
Mm,
right? And people say that. Um, 30 years ago, I've been in this space for about 30 years.
okay.
And as I've grown and evolved, my mission and purpose have evolved as well.
Mm,
So when I first created, it was called Rainbow,
okay.
Raanbow, and it
Okay.
stood for Raising Awareness to Achieve Natural Balance for Our Women.
Wow.
That was in the mid 90s, 96,
Wow.
97, 98, where I just wanted a space where we as women could support each other, right? We want the
Yeah.
same thing. So how can we achieve these goals? And it was a support kind of accountability
Okay.
circle. And we kept that going for about 8 years. It grew to the point where we'd have an annual retreat. We met twice a month with assignments, things to read and come back. And it was a very, very safe space, very vulnerable for
Mm,
personal growth and development. At that time, I was married,
okay.
and then I got divorced, and
Okay.
then I went back into the workforce. And that now corporate America, because before I started my career as a school teacher, middle
Okay.
school teacher,
Props,
working,
props to you. I really
work,
think it's the most important job in the world. I
it
really do.
is, it is. And I had such a light bulb moment during
Yeah.
COVID that just,
Mm,
it angered me when I saw how unappreciated, how underpaid teachers are.
yeah.
And in my mind, somewhere is like, if I can get into the education space later on for advocacy, I really would. Our teachers need to be
Yeah.
paid and appreciated much more than they are. That's a whole nother
It
podcast, but
is. It is.
I'm
And,
very
and I would
passionate.
love to have that conversation. It's very important. But
Yes,
yes, continue.
yes. Okay. So then going into corporate America, I faced different dynamics because education is very different than corporate America.
It is.
And I experienced many obstacles in my career. And at that time, I thought it was because I was very ambitious as a woman.
Right.
And the opportunities that I was seeking wouldn't come
Mm,
the way I was pursuing them. Also, coming to realize that divinely on my journey, there are lessons that I'm learning.
right.
So each disappointment, I learned something. So then
Yes.
in the space, I was like, I want to create the space now for women to understand that you can be involved in your life and creating your life. We're not victims.
Yeah.
We don't have to settle for
Mm,
anything, but you have to have a vision
yeah.
and you have to believe that you're worthy. So that's then it became moved from support and accountability to let's get motivated. Let's have a vision and work
Yeah.
for it. So then I came to embracing your power. And I love the name. As I brainstormed for the name, I wanted something that really represented me, my
Mhm.
brand,
Yeah.
which is when someone meets me the first time or meets me initially, soft, approachable,
Mm.
very friendly, warm, accommodating. However, I have a fierceness, right? And a belief and a stance that shocks people when
Yeah,
they realize, oh, wait, she's not just nice. She's not a pushover. She's moving. She's
yeah,
moving for something, and I'm going towards somewhere.
yeah.
And I think that is the quality trait about myself that I love the most. I really do,
I
because
love it.
it continues to surprise them.
Yeah.
Um, so
I have to interject here and just,
yes.
I looked at your birthday. Everybody who listens to me regularly knows that in some way or shape or form, we may talk about astrology. And so you're an Aquarius.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And you really defined an Aquarius perfectly in that moment. It's like, you know, I've got this front, but when people get to know me, they know why I'm here and
Yeah.
where I'm going. You have this
Hmm.
deep purpose about moving things forward and not settling, right? It's
Right.
always about the future and
Always.
how I can get there. And there's a deep philanthropic purpose and flavor to Aquarius too that I find, especially with individuals who are in the empowerment field.
Hmm.
They're here to
Hmm.
make change, collective
Yes.
Change.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You just spoke. I got goosebumps. Because 2 years ago, that became my thing. Let's do collective. And you saw that in our
Yes.
closet cleanse, collective energy, momentum. Let's do it
Yeah.
together in different parts of the nation. And let's do that. So, yeah, thank you for that.
Of course.
It
So take
affirms.
me back to the fierceness of that moment, right?
Hmm.
The fierce moment you want to talk to us today was right around that time.
Well,
Um,
there are two. So when I
okay.
was
Yeah.
faculty member, 2010,
Hmm.
I was offered the opportunity, as I said before we actually started recording, I went in higher education
Yeah.
from admissions, which is the front part of the
Yep.
enrollment process, to academic advising, to
Okay.
career advisor, and then faculty. Now, in the meantime, I graduated with my master's degree in human resources,
Okay.
and I was really trying to move my career into human resources.
Mm.
So when I went very strategically to career services at that time, we would have a lot of career fairs for the students. And it's
Right.
okay, my future employer is going to find me here. So again, very strategic about where I wanted to go.
Yeah.
So when I was offered the opportunity to work as a faculty member, it was part-time,
Okay.
right? And that was in 2010, in the
Mm.
middle of the recession.
Mm.
And my long-term goal at that time was to retire as a professor because it
Okay.
was a very noble
Yeah.
position. It was passionate and I could make money doing something I loved.
Yeah.
So then my position was I'd have to give up my full-time position and my benefits to take an adjunct professor, which is a contract with no
Yeah.
benefits,
No
no
benefit.
guarantee of how much money I'm going to make. I'm a single mom.
Yeah.
My son was in elementary school.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
I was faced with this decision in 2010, and I thought about it. And there's one thing I want the listeners to take away from me. One of my messages is life, universe, God, source, whatever you believe in speaks to you when you
Hmm.
pay attention.
Yeah.
That it was huge for me. So I'm faced with this big decision. I want to work as a faculty position. This is here now. What does
Yeah.
this mean? 20 years, 30 years later, how am I going to work as a professor without the experience? And
Right.
because I established good rapport with the deans, it was ripe. But I've got a child and I've got this. So I thought
Yeah.
about it, thought about it, thought about it. I said, you know what? I think I'm going to do it. So that night, I remember reading a story, my son, his bedtime story called The Story of Jumping Mouse. And just
Okay.
fast forward, the mouse gave up his vision, his ears, and other faculties to help other animals trying to get to the far off land. The
Wow.
mouse got very tired and was crying. And um, a frog came to him and said, why are you crying? He said, because I've given everything of myself basically, and I can't get to the far off land, which to me
Right.
represented a goal or a vision. So
Yes.
the frog said, just jump as high as you can. And when it jumped, he turned into an eagle and he was flying above. And I read that, I said, oh, it's my time to jump. Just like that.
Yes.
This is
Yes.
my time to jump. So I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to resign. And I did that. And I was telling Keisha Smith, I'm going to mention her name on this podcast because she's
Yes.
also a member of Loud Women Nation. She brought me to the group. So I'm so
Amazing.
grateful for that. She sent me, and I still have the email to this day. She had gone to the church service that Sunday, and the
Hmm.
sermon's topic was, are there any high jumpers in the house?
Yeah.
So then
Oh.
you get confirmation and affirmation.
I love this. Again, my regulars on this podcast will understand why I'm giggling because one of my favorite things to talk about almost every minute of every day are the signs that are all around us if we're paying attention.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that we are going a mile a minute.
Hmm.
Okay? Almost everyone I have on this podcast is a type A personality.
Hmm.
But underneath, they desire that peace, that
Hmm.
flow. And one of the only ways to get there, to get to that space, is to quiet. And
Right.
one of the gifts of that space and being able to
Hmm.
flow down the right path
Yeah.
is observing and paying
Hmm.
attention. And
Right.
I call it playing with life. Like it really is playing with life because when you ask, you shall receive.
Yeah.
And the signs just show up. And I just actually published a blog um, on oh my gosh, Substack uh,
Hmm.
about I call it what I channeled on Saturday. I literally went on a walk and I felt like the whole thing was a channel and paying attention to the signs that showed up. So I really appreciate you sharing that.
Hmm.
What I know about Aquarius is that they love to take risks, right? However, being a mom, single
Hmm.
mom, young child, it's harder
Yes.
to do that natural risk taking because
Right.
you have someone who needs you, and you
Hmm.
really do need to think about, am I going to be able to sustain our life the way it is?
Hmm.
But to get those signs that allowed you to take that bold step,
Yeah.
what a beautiful, beautiful story.
Yeah. It was amazing. So during that time, I decided, okay, let me put a framework in place for my coaching business.
Okay.
So
Okay.
2010, I met with one of the faculty members there, and he helped me with that process. And the name Embrace Your Power came to being.
Okay.
So it's the feminine and the masculine. And mind it, in 2010, I didn't know that polarity. That to
Yeah.
me is just resonating within the last year. So as I reflect back on what I did then, just to understand how intuitively I was guided, it blows my mind to be that tapped in for
Yeah.
that. So Embrace Your Power was born, and all I did was save the domain name and just sat. It sat for 10 years. I created the logo and it
Yes.
just sat, and I just waited for things to happen. So fast forward to 2010, 10 years later, I've worked a couple other places and still experiencing this obstacle in my career not being able to work in HR. So I graduated with my master's degree in human resources in 2006 and still was not working in the industry.
Hmm.
Again, because I worked at the university, I worked as a career services advisor. I knew about networking. I
Right.
knew about that. I was, very strategic about forming relationship with decision makers. And so I was doing what I needed to do and still not experiencing what I needed to break into human resources. So in 2020, I'd been in one position for 4 years with the company for six, and that's not my track record. Track record before that, every 2 years, I'm changing positions
Yeah.
because again, strategically, I'm moving
Right.
forward. And I experienced this block. It's like, why is my door not opening? I'm really confused. And I remember asking the universe, what, please, just give me some clarity. Give me
Yeah.
clarity. Why am I still here? Why is this not happening? And then George Floyd happened in
Oh,
2010,
okay.
COVID.
Yep.
And during that time, now I'm working from home for a little while. And I was in a networking a webinar I attended, and there's some powerful women in the corporate America in the space of diversity, equity, inclusion, talking
Yes.
about that and women in leadership. And I was like, this is amazing. So my soul is taking it all in. And someone mentioned the book by Minda Harts called The Memo.
Okay.
So I read that book.
Mm.
It was so well written. When I say I had an epiphany and a light bulb moment that just shook me to my core, when I realized my obstacles were because I was a Black woman in
Mm.
corporate
Yeah.
and didn't have the advocacy and the sponsorship that I needed to move my career forward, and the unconscious biases that
Right.
were in place to keep me back. And I was like, wow. And then to me, to say to myself, and I've been a part of the problem. I had
Mm.
to acknowledge that as well. It's because when I left a position before, I was not forthright in saying my opportunities were blocked. That's why I'm leaving. I would say I'm just leaving for a better opportunity.
Yeah.
So I also didn't give them the opportunity to make changes and to see things from my perspective, but then I
Right.
didn't see it that way either.
Speaking up
So
and not being afraid to speak up about
exactly.
what you knew what was happening and what you needed.
When I say it was just like you said, walking through the park and getting so much
Yes.
downloads on everything because
Mhm.
when I was working as a faculty member, I back up. So now I'm hustling, right? So I'm working
Yep.
three, four different jobs. So I picked up a couple coaching circle gigs, working as an adjunct professor, and then I was doing something. So I was all over the place. So then I was diagnosed with hyperthyroidism, so an
Okay.
overactive thyroid in
Yes.
2012. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. What I want to do. And, I've tried to find natural remedies, natural cures, blah, 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 blah. And went to the doctors, was able to get my medication down. I was prescribed a medication, methimazole, 20 milligrams a day.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried acupuncture, more meditation, more mindfulness, was able to get it down to now I'm on 5 milligrams twice a week.
Amazing.
So that was it. Why I'm going to make this connection. So now I'm back in 2020 having all these moments. Okay, this is discrimination. It's bias. My career's been blocked. This is a Black woman thing. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do with this information? My thyroid, my voice,
Mm. Yeah.
the chakras, because I discovered the chakras in the
Absolutely.
meantime.
Absolutely. Our body speaks to us. Our emotions are completely tied to our symptoms. Yeah. And why, it's so important. I hope everyone listening um, takes this away that when you start feeling things in your body, it could be anything, right? It could
Mm-hmm.
be my knee keeps
Yes.
hurting.
Yeah.
I keep getting headaches. I keep getting a pain on my left shoulder. Whatever
Mm-hmm.
it may be,
Mm-hmm.
try investigating first the mind
Yes.
body connection
Absolutely.
to get
Mm-hmm.
some information there
Yep.
because it's so amazing what you can find out
Yep.
before running to grab another pill, getting the doctor to write you a prescription. This
Mm-hmm.
is where healing,
Absolutely.
starts.
Right. And especially if it's a recurring pain,
Yes.
journal, journal, and figure out what's going in your life, and you will see that there's something that triggered that. Our bodies speak to us.
Before you
Life
continue, because I
speaks.
know there's so much more there and I want you to get to it, because
Uh-huh.
I just have to say, because we have an epidemic today of thyroid issues in women, right? Hashimoto's. I'm one who has it as well,
Mm-hmm.
managing that. And you have to wonder,
Mm-hmm.
right? The connection of speaking up, of empowerment, of sharing our voice in whatever
Exactly.
way we need to.
Yeah.
And I know that that has been the path for me as well,
Mm-hmm.
right? I was
Yes.
became very clear about what I was holding back, what
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't willing to share and why.
Yeah.
And slowly but surely,
Mm-hmm.
addressing that
Right.
and healing myself, right?
Exactly. Right.
So,
Yeah. Coming to the realization that I'm a mover. So I'd move my career forward, but then it
yeah.
became apparent this is bigger than me.
hmm
This is for me to use my voice for others. It was such a powerful time because the news was carrying everything. So I'm listening to all these powerful women in Congress talking about using their voice and the injustice. And I'm like, I've got to, wherever I am, I'm going to use my voice. And I remember finding a picture, a wall picture that I had in my house decades ago of Harriet Tubman. And I took it out and I put it right in front of my desk so I can see it. And I dubbed myself the modern day Harriet Tubman. I said, I'm going to use my voice
So
now
inspiring.
to help others to
Yeah.
find that freedom because
Yeah.
you've got to figure out what it is and then move forward. So during that time, a position became available at my current company, which I
Okay.
knew I was overqualified for,
Right.
and I was told that I wasn't qualified.
Mm.
So that was really what did it for me. So I resigned
Mm.
in the middle of COVID
Yep.
with no job, no nothing.
Yeah.
It was so empowering when my manager said, so do you have a job? And the confusion on her face. No, but this is not it. So
Right.
I've got to go. I've
Yeah.
got to go because this is not working. I'm not valued. I'm not respected. I remember one time there was a flurry of meetings and things going on, and I can see it. I just remember I'm looking this way because if I looked at them and I'm going, I don't belong here.
Yeah. You know
I
when it's
don't,
time. And
I
sometimes
don't
it's a
belong.
tower moment. Sometimes
Yeah,
it's not the smart decision of make sure you have X amount of dollars in your bank to last you for 6 months, 12 months. Sometimes you just have to get the hell out.
I had to. I had to.
Right?
When I saw decisions being made and no one who looked like me was
Mm.
making decisions, and what was coming out was actually offensive to our culture because and they weren't even aware enough to see it. This email comes out. And then all the Black women were huddling. Can't you see that right here in this space, we're divided and you can't see that? And you don't have anyone who represents any person of color making decisions. And I was like, I don't belong here. I
Yeah.
don't. So then I resigned, got into the book, and then started teaching empowerment courses based upon that book and made a
Wow.
commitment that my next space, the next position, I want to be in a space of diversity, equity, inclusion. I'm going to use my voice and my
Yeah.
experience to further the movement, to bridge the gap,
Yeah.
so that supporters and allies and sponsors can have a better idea of what it feels like, and so that women of color know how to use their voice, how to speak up in a way that's productive
Yes.
and educational and not just venting and emotional
Right.
and
Right.
bleeding.
And that's really important. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So
Wow.
that was the big one. When I gave that up, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm a modern day. So to go from somebody who wasn't speaking up at all to like, all women are free, we're all it was huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
It is,
Yeah.
it is huge. And I think that there are also moments in time, right? We have there's an energetics to the decades of our life as well, right?
Yes.
Where
Yeah.
we're supposed to go through certain things as human
Mhm.
beings, not just women, not just men, all of us. The
Mhm.
certain decades are meant to get us to rise up
Exactly.
for others, for ourselves, to make these really big, sometimes painful shifts, but necessary shifts
Mhm. Mhm.
that are not only for ourselves but for others. And and that's what I'm hearing, right? You had this purpose all along, this
Mhm.
thread of a purpose,
Yes.
regardless of what career you've had, which is
Yeah.
to empower women, to
Mhm.
support women, to raise them up and raise up their voices. But the purpose has evolved,
Yes.
right? And you saw something in your trajectory
Mhm.
that you wanted to address
Right.
as part
Yes.
of your mission.
Right. And again, listening to people. So after I resigned, because I resigned, I gave 3 weeks notice.
Yeah.
One of the younger Black women who worked there was walking by her desk and she said, if you're leaving, what's going to happen to me? And that's was like, wow. So then I was like, yeah, this is what I have to do. So when I resigned, I started teaching the courses. I went back, got them in virtual courses. I did that. So I was unemployed for a year and a half.
Okay.
And during that time, I did a lot of traveling,
Mhm.
right? I was living my life.
Good for
And my
you.
lesson at that point was when I go back to work, this travel, this time with my family, this time with my friends, this time discovering me has to be a part of the schedule.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
my next position has to be able to accommodate this as well. And it happened just that way. So the next position that found me, I
Yes.
was minding my own business at my desk and I was contacted by an executive recruiter. And the position that I was offered was the exact title plus some to the title I was told I was not qualified for.
Wow, Janice.
So, yes, so
Full
I was there
circle.
6 years, right? And they deemed me not qualified. And in 6 interviews, I was
Yeah.
qualified enough for that position. When I do want to say here, only I can share when I left that other position, I did take legal action. I
Yeah.
mean, when I say bold, I went bold. And
Yeah.
when I say it shocked them, it did, but signed an agreement, so I can't say more with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But to do it in the middle of COVID, and again to see the purpose behind it, and it got scary.
Of
But when I went
course.
in to the new position, I was able to immediately do the influence and create the spaces for those type of conversations, for diversity, for belonging, for leadership, for using your voice through our ERGs, through our
Wow.
speech program. It was a wonderful experience. It
What would you
really.
say, couple questions that I'm curious about, because I do feel that from a bigger perspective, a global lesson that COVID had to happen to kind of wake us up on
Yes.
many different levels.
Yeah.
One of those levels is to who we are, what we're
Mhm.
here to do,
Mhm.
pausing to recognize what's meaningful in my life and what isn't, and taking
Mhm.
action on it, right? And I think we saw that show up in so many different ways,
Mhm.
like parents now spending more time with their children when they
Yeah.
didn't before,
Mhm.
recognizing that, gosh, I really haven't been happy in this
Mhm.
position, or it's not a good position for me. What if I were to, start doing something else?
Right.
People recognizing that they weren't eating well, weren't exercising, focusing on their,
Yeah.
mental and emotional well-being. All
Mhm.
sorts of things happened. Obviously, we know that it was a terrible time and a lot of people lost their life and did get sick. But I'm wondering, so much was happening outside of you. And
Mm-hmm.
inside of you with that transition, how did you manage that transition? And
Mm-hmm.
what were some of the, you can call them strengths or skills, or maybe your mindset,
Mm-hmm.
that your faith that helped you really use that time and really overcome the challenges that came with it?
That is such a great question because I'm very reflective.
Hmm.
I'm always reflecting. So my marriage wasn't the best. That forced me in. So I began to grow. And
Hmm.
then learning to trust the universe and trusting myself, trusting that I'm going to be okay.
Yeah,
As long if I have to hustle, if I have to go work at the mall for part-time, which I've done, I did
yeah.
that before. I actually had an epiphany working at the mall as I was working as an adjunct professor. So, understanding getting rid of pride and the ego.
Yes, yes. It's so funny you say that because sometimes I'm like, you know what? What if I just became a delivery person for a while or an Uber driver for a while? I wonder what I would learn from
Yes.
the people driving with me, from whatever I would be, just being in the moment and letting thoughts come to me.
Mm.
It's just an interesting
Yes.
perspective, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had such an epiphany. Can't even say a word. An aha moment working part-time at a luxury store, which was really a waste of time. So I was
Right.
working at a designer store. I was working at Saks Fifth Avenue, the
Okay.
outlet,
Yes.
part-time,
Okay.
just spending everything I made. But it's clear, right? So I'm there as an adjunct professor by night, part-time, what, $12 an hour there. So
Yeah.
people go like, you're an adjunct professor and this is not beneath you. No, I need to pay my bills.
Right.
I will do what I need to do until I get where I'm going.
Yeah.
And I had such a moment because most of my peers at the place were college age students.
Right.
So I remember once she was asking me something, she was preparing for an interview. So I gave her some advice. And she said, Janice, I wish I could put you in my pocket. So every time I have a question, I say, Janice, what should I do? And I thought, and I sat with that. I said, you know what? This is who I am. It's not what I do.
Right.
So if I didn't have that position, I wouldn't have had that anchoring moment
Yeah.
that brought such clarity to who I am as a person. I'm an educator. I'm a coach. It doesn't matter what my title is. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what you try to tell me. I'm not. This is who I am.
Yeah, I take myself with me wherever I go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm not just one thing. I think this is something that I have realized in my own journey along the way, because we
Mhm.
do get stuck on what's my title.
Yes.
And I'm so many different things. I have this conversation with my children too, because I happen to know them really well, and they're
Right.
creative beings with so much to contribute, so many different talents and desires. I'm like, it's
Mhm.
okay not to just be one thing,
Right.
right? We take ourselves
Exactly.
wherever we go, and if we acknowledge and validate that, we're really opening ourselves up to so many opportunities in
Exactly.
life that can bring us joy, right?
Mhm.
What
Right.
a beautiful lesson, not only to receive, but to share
Yeah.
with the younger generation.
Yeah. And it's so important, especially when you're trying to make a transition in corporate
Yes.
America when they see you don't have the experience,
Yeah.
position to be
Yes.
able to speak with that with conviction. Because when I got that last position after I quit in 2020, it was what I did, who I am, that got me that job, not a role.
Right. Right.
Right. So
I
that it
do
was,
think that we're more open. At least this is a gut instinct. I am not out there applying for jobs, so I have no idea. But I feel that we've come to a place in society where we're recognizing that we are human beings with many talents.
yes,
And
yes.
I find that there are enough people today that who have the power to hire,
Hmm.
that are willing and open to kind of set the resume aside
Yes,
and have the conversation of, just tell me who you are. Tell
yes,
me, what you would be bringing to this job and the
exactly.
strengths that you're bringing to this job, and and have that kind of a conversation instead
That's,
of, black and white, this is what I've been
mhm.
doing, and this is the
Yes.
only thing that I can do, which is typically false of everybody.
Right. Yeah, it's true. It's happening passively and
Yeah,
informally, and it's happening informally. Companies that have really adopted robust diversity, equity, and inclusion policies
yeah,
are revisiting descriptions to eliminate the degree requirements if
yeah,
it's not required and really opening that space up. So
yeah.
that's something else I think is very important too, because what's going on with the current administration, people are thinking that DEI is dead and it's not.
I want to
Companies
hear
that,
more about that. That was something when I was preparing for our conversation,
mhm.
It's such a sensitive topic today,
It is.
right?
It
With
is.
what's happening in the world right now. And I'm not a political person. I pay
Mhm.
attention. I'm paying more
Right.
attention than I ever have in my life,
Mhm.
because it's important that we all pay attention and that we have a voice and that we're doing something, right? We're doing our part, based on our values and, and
Mhm.
our beliefs. But it seems like we're going backwards a little bit
Mhm.
when
Mhm.
it comes to equity, diversion, and inclusion.
Mhm.
Why do you think we're not? Why do you think we still have, why is there hope? I guess that's my question. Why is there hope?
Because of my fight and being able to get into the spaces where these decisions are being made and the conversations are happening, there are employers, there are leaders, there are managers who are people. Because diversity, equity, inclusion is a human initiative. That's what
Right,
it is. We
right.
see people for who they are, for their talents, for their drive, for their potential, and we hire them based upon that. That's not going away.
Yeah,
So they just change the name of it.
yeah.
Culture and
Right.
engagement is fine. That's what
Yes.
we'll call it. So that's not
Yeah.
going to go because I've had several people approach me, well, Janice, that's what you want to do. I say, yeah, and I will.
This
I
is the
will.
beautiful thing I think about the United States and the country we live in is that we shift, we
We
can,
pivot.
we can pivot. We can pivot quickly and say, okay, so I can't call it DEI.
Yeah.
Let me change the name of it. Let's create a spin here. And
Yes.
I love hearing that. I love
Yes.
hearing that that's happening.
Yes, it is happening. And
Yeah.
then again, the impact from the administration are for companies that are federally funded.
Yeah.
So private organizations can do what they want.
Yeah.
So that's not going to change. So that's
Thank you for sharing that because, I'm not a recruiter. I'm not involved in hiring, firing people, but I care deeply
hmm
about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I hate to feel that all the work that we've done over all these years is just going to be thrown away,
Yeah.
and that people will be living in fear again, right?
hmm
Or in lack with
hmm
a non-productive energy, right?
Right.
And um, so it's great to hear that perspective from you.
Yeah. But unfortunate the fear is there. Unfortunately, the fear
Yeah,
is
it
there.
is. The
And
fear is
people
there.
who see it and hear it
Yeah,
and start to retract and live in fear. And we know what that energy does to what
correct.
they attract. So it's important for those of us who are in that space as light workers
Mm-hmm.
to spread the word, to hold a space, to
Yes, and
share
to
the hope.
bring us up out of that victim
Yeah.
energy and start to see the possibility and live in possibility every day. So, um, I'm curious when you were in that new position and making a difference and really shifting things, what were some of the outcomes that you saw
hmm
that you were proud of?
Some of the outcomes were using our ERGs, and a lot of companies have what are ERGs, employee resource groups or
Yeah.
affinity groups, where they get together based on
Yes.
common
Hmm.
interests. So we had our groups. One of the things that I did relatively quickly and was brought to me by senior leadership was creating this space for the leaders of those ERGs to collaborate and become close.
Okay.
And because I demonstrated how to do that, they were then able to funnel that down to their respective ERGs. And
Mm,
what that also created was it broke down the silos because the ERGs have employees from different departments. So in a
right.
typical day, week, or month, whatever it is, they're working with their departments. But when
Right.
they come into this space of an ERG, they're working with people from different departments,
Okay.
which created teamwork, cohesiveness, and collaboration for projects outside of the ERGs,
Love it.
which was amazing. And then also the confidence in these employees who took these leadership roles, who were fearful of public speaking. Can't do this. If you're passionate about the environment, just lead with your passion. No,
Yeah.
because I'm a passion oriented person, they saw me and I led with that. I'm an introvert. I'm
Mm.
quiet unless I'm talking about what moves me, what I'm passionate about. And then I let that lead and guide me. So me being able to demonstrate that
Yes.
was so impactful and could see them moving into their leadership roles. And I didn't know I could do this. And what my lesson was, what took me away, because I said, like every 10 years, like you said, I learned
Yeah.
something about myself.
Hmm.
So, for example, when I started teaching at DeVry University, up until then, I had the women's empowerment group.
Okay.
DeVry University, because it started as a technical institute, the population was mainly men.
Mm,
So in the career development class that I taught, which I love because I had a lot of leeway to bring in those soft skills. What does
yes.
success look like? What does it feel like? So it was like I was coaching in this class. I had so much
Yes.
leeway. It was mainly men. And they opened up and they received. I was like, oh, this, I didn't know that I had that impact
Yeah.
on men and women. So that's
Yeah.
what I took away from that. And
Absolutely.
then being in my last role, because I work with so many leaders, executive leaders, C-suite, and seeing them come to me. Janice, I feel so much more comfortable when you're in this space and you're guiding the meeting, and I want to do this, but I'm nervous. It's like, wow, because we have a perception that
Yeah. So going back
person,
to what you mentioned in the beginning is having mentors, having sponsors. It's one of the ways that we as individuals can get into action, right? These are the
yes,
things that we can do for ourselves is to try and really solicit that mentorship and sponsorship.
yeah,
And the fact
yes,
that they're doing that with you, they're seeing you as a mentor and a sponsor to help them,
yeah,
you know,
right.
move forward.
Right.
That's
Yes, because
beautiful.
then what I realized is that I had a bias and a blind spot. For some
Hmm.
reason, I limited my impact and influence to a certain level and below.
Right. And
Yeah.
also and also just, thinking that only women needed your support when men were also just they needed that as well, right?
So
And
receptive.
I do see
Agree.
that sometimes now we're having so many conversations around our masculine energy, our feminine
Yeah.
energy. And it's a difficult conversation for, I think, especially older men to have, because that just
Hmm.
wasn't the way they were raised. It wasn't even the way we were raised. We didn't have those conversations. It's like, you're a woman, be the woman.
Right, right, right,
You're a
right.
man, be the man. But I think it's easier for our young men.
Yes,
They've been hearing it for a lot longer. I
exactly.
have had so many conversations with young men who talk about wanting to be vulnerable, wanting to be able to
Yeah.
share, feeling like it's okay to show my emotions and cry if something is bothering me and not get, punished for it. I think that for a long time, men didn't feel like they could share their emotions
Right,
at all,
right.
which
Hmm.
which everyone suffers when that's the case.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
everyone.
When we were,
Women suffer, men suffer, our families suffer, our workplaces suffer
hmm,
when we can't trust,
right,
you know,
right.
or yeah, when we can't trust anybody, right?
Hmm.
And when we show our emotions, it helps to build that trust.
You're right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah. So that
Wow.
was really great. And then being courageous enough and bold enough, because one our women's ERG, that was the phrase. It was like, do it scared.
Yeah.
So there are many times I would bring up a conversation, especially around diversity, and I'm trembling inside, but I know I have to do it.
Yeah.
So one time we were having a group discussion, and they were like, Janice, are you going to see the Barbie movie? And I said, Barbie didn't have any Black friends when I was growing up,
Mm,
just like that. And
yeah.
the dialogue that came out of that was so authentic
Yeah.
and so eye-opening, and it was good. But Janice, 5 years before, wouldn't have said it,
Right.
right?
Right.
So,
I hear
yeah.
you.
Mhm.
Yeah. Good for you. That fire, that flame inside of you is just like,
Yes.
so yeah, going back to the meds, as your voice increases, the meds decrease.
Yes. Exactly.
Wow, I love it. I love seeing that in real time. You mentioned that, part of why you made this change over time is that um you wanted to be like a beacon of boldness and courageousness
Mhm.
to help the women coming behind you.
Yes.
And healing the generational wounds and ties.
Mhm.
Um, just yesterday we had a a healing
We
session in
did.
our community around ancestral healing.
Right.
And I just think it's such an important dialogue for everyone, everyone. It doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman,
Mhm.
but to really understand what your ancestors went
Right.
through and why they went through it. Understand their perspective first and foremost, but
Mhm.
then also understand what about those um, patterns
Mhm.
are within me that I may not
Right.
be aware of, that I'm carrying into
Exactly.
this generation, into future generations that really don't serve me or us any
Mhm.
longer. I'm
Mhm.
curious because of wanting to heal,
Mhm.
the new generation coming. What have you learned about your ancestors
Mhm.
or about your history that has really, helped to fuel this courage
Mhm.
and boldness that you've brought into your life?
It's so interesting because it's a combination of things, right? My family's from Jamaica, so we
Hmm.
came as immigrants, and the hard work and the vision to create a very successful financial life,
Yeah.
and I admire it, and of course I'm living, reaping the benefits of that. And one thing I'm really grateful for is that my siblings and I are very, very close, so we talk a lot about it. I have one brother who really channels the brilliancy and the hard work of our grandfather, who was a
Mm,
woodman by trade and was able to do wonderful woodwork, and had property that he rented and had multiple streams of income and was okay. And then, as I said before, I'm a thinker, so there were aspects of our upbringing that no longer worked for me, which I had the foresight to recognize very early.
hmm.
So we're very religious upbringing, very, very religious, and it served us well as far as discipline is concerned and safety. However, when I went to college, I began to question what's the difference between this biblical story and Pinocchio
Right.
and Jonah. And there were aspects I was like, this, it doesn't work for me anymore. I
Yeah.
found it restrictive and
Yeah.
constrictive.
Hmm.
So I began to move in a more spiritual way, right? Not the religious confines, the
Right.
spirituality of it.
Yeah.
So then I raised my son that way, to be a spiritual person.
Hmm.
And it's been so rewarding when he repeats back to me something. I
Hmm.
don't remember what it was. And he says, well, mommy, if it's not divine's work, then it won't happen. I said,
Yeah.
you are so right, son. Go repeat that. I loved it. And to get that from my siblings. So we're in a position now where I'll think about it. So just because it was done this way all the time doesn't mean it has to keep going. And I had one moment with my son. And I said, my son, because I've been divorced for decades,
Right.
my son has been my mirror. Right? Many of us get that mirror when we're paying attention from either a partner
Right.
or a spouse, but I didn't
Yes.
have that. But it's my son because I pay attention. So I remember when he was in preschool, he wanted goldfish, the crackers for breakfast.
Yes.
Mommy, can I have goldfish for breakfast? I said, no. He said, why not? And I thought about it. I said, sure enough, my mom wouldn't give that to me, but she's not here. And I need to get him to school on time. And these are baked crackers. Yes, son, you can have crackers and orange juice for breakfast. So it's really being able to stop and pause and say, this doesn't serve me. And it could
Yeah.
be something that simple that we're doing what our parents did just because that's all we know.
Yeah.
So when someone questions you, don't take it as a challenge. I don't take it as a challenge. Let me think about, that actually, it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So no, yes, son, you can have
I love
the
that.
whole
Let's just pour some milk and let's pour the fish in a bowl
a
and pour some
bowl.
milk. Let me give you a slice of turkey so you can have some protein. Yeah, I hear
Yeah,
you. That and you're right. And I often say that in our work in coaching, the ahas are small, but
they
they're
are.
powerful. And the
Yes,
shifts are small, but
yes.
powerful. And so just
How?
being able to create space to
Mm-hmm.
reflect
Yeah.
and pause for a moment. Why am I saying no? Why am I saying you can't, something as simple, we were raised by, you can't go to sleep with wet hair, you're going to get a cold.
Yes.
Or
Yes.
you can't, I don't know, there's so many silly things
Right.
that we were raised believing that really have never been proven true.
Exactly.
And I
Exactly.
found myself repeating them to my children and my daughter recently, because I said it again, just unconsciously, hey, what, don't you want to blow dry your hair before you go to bed? It's like, Mom, I don't get a cold. I'm fine. I do it every night. I'm not sick. I'm like, okay, sweetie, thank you. Thank you for mirroring that back to me so I can stop believing that that's going to be true, right?
Right.
But this is how we move forward in life,
Right. So
you
then
know?
there are other beliefs that are so ingrained, like I have to hustle to
Right.
make. So you
Yes.
adopt that hard work. But I learned last year that pink, soft, feminine energy flows. It flows to me. So
Oh, it
that's what I
does.
adopted this year. Oh no, ease and flow. So when I hear, oh, another work, gotta struggle. Oh no,
Uh-uh.
I refuse that one.
Oh no. Yeah.
Yeah, that I no longer believe. So I get a lot of that. Well, now my family says, "Oh, Janice, you're going to be okay," because I was actually let go from my job in August of last year, and I haven't started looking yet because I'm in this,
Yeah, you're
Really,
feeling it
really,
out.
I'm feeling out my
Waiting for
business,
the
coaching
signs.
business, and seeing the perfect opportunity will come to me if it comes before I start applying. But my family members and I are like, oh, you'll be okay because they saw me in 2010. 2010, are you started applying? Are you looking? Are you working? What are you going to do? Are you worried? No, I'm not worried. I'm good. I'll
They
be
do
fine.
get so nervous for us. I think you and I are in a similar age group, and
Mhm.
um, and our mothers and fathers and grandparents, and they were raised with having to survive,
Right.
and there's nothing wrong with it. Listen, they worked hard.
Hmm.
They gave us what we needed. They made sure our foundation was stable no matter what
Hmm.
income they were making. And they are, that's something I've had to just get used to. They're always going to ask that question.
Right.
Are you okay?
Hmm.
What are you doing? Have
Right.
you made that call yet? Because they
Hmm.
have this fear,
Yeah.
this underlying, fear and worry that you're not going to be okay, you're not going to make it, you're not going to be able to, feed yourself and your child.
Hmm.
And that's one of the patterns that I've had to just
Hmm.
turn down and really just have that relationship with spirit where
Yeah.
I know you've got me.
Yes.
I don't necessarily have to know how it's all going to show up.
Hmm.
And but it shows up. It shows
Right.
up beautifully and at the right time. And it comes from all different types of sources, sources
Yeah.
that I didn't even, I couldn't have imagined, right?
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
and living that way, living with more grace and ease, living with it's also a life of living with less stress
Yes.
and overwhelm and less health challenges because of it
Hmm.
as well, which is still today such a huge issue for the majority of the workforce,
Yes, it is.
and we're in this tender environment where engagement, disengagement rather, is at an all-time high.
It is.
Um, we started to really make some inroads with, workplace
Work from
wellness and
home. Right.
flexibility, and now it seems like we're going backwards just a little bit. And so we need to
Exactly.
keep pushing the agenda forward because
Hmm.
um, we have to care for the whole human,
We do. The whole human.
and I'm an advocate of flow, as you know, and there we have cycles
Hmm.
that we should follow naturally. And if we
Right.
understand the natural cycles and the
Hmm.
rhythms and follow them, then we can be healthy of mind, body, and spirit and still be
Hmm.
successful and still achieve our goals without, burning the candle at both ends and not being there for the people that really need us or that who we desire, you know,
Right.
to spend our
Exactly.
time with. So
Hmm.
it's still a huge challenge today, but one day at a time, as I say.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned the cycles because that's where I feel like I am now. Like I've been in this cocooning phase
Yeah.
where I'm really just
It's very
self-learning.
possible you're in your cocoon year. We'll have to
Yeah.
check that out.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll check that out. But I've been learning more and more about myself these moments. It's like, wow, 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 wow. Just
Yeah.
wow, wow, wow. Yeah. It's been a crazy. So when
Wonderful,
people
Janice.
meet me in a circle, I love life. I love
Yeah.
life. I love the dance. I love the play.
Yeah.
Just you described it. It's beautiful. It really is.
Thank you so much for sharing. I want to know more about um how you're operating today,
Mhm.
how you're working with women and empowering them.
Mhm.
Are there special things that you're doing or focusing on that
Mhm.
you're spending your time on these days?
Yes, yes, yes. I still meet with some women I met in my last job. So outside of the circle, we
Okay.
had first it was bi-monthly
Yeah.
empowerment meetings. So now
Okay.
we're monthly. We moved to
Okay.
monthly. So I let them know that this month will be the last monthly meeting. I'm going to move that to quarterly
Okay.
because I'm going to relaunch that empowerment e-course
Okay.
based upon the book, The Memo, because
Beautiful.
I think it's needed now more
Yes.
than ever because
Yes.
there's so
Bring it
much
back.
fear about what's going on in the workplace. And
Yeah.
there's trust and hope when you as an individual realize what's in your power to control,
Yeah.
how you can seek advocacy on your own. If there's not
Mhm.
a formal program at your job, you seek a mentor. That's how I got the adjunct professor position at DeVry. I said,
Yeah.
hey, can you be my mentor? She said, sure, we're going to go this way. I was like, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? When she decided to leave, she's like, I want you to take my spot. So it's
Yeah.
really empowering women to use your voice, be observant. Someone is always there to help.
Yeah. You just have to
Just have to
ask.
be willing to ask. You have to be willing to
I love
So
that.
I'm looking forward to relaunching that,
Okay.
and then more pop-up empowerment courses in the local area, virtual courses. So that's what's in my headspace now.
Love it. Can't wait
Um,
to see what you create. So pop-up empowerment courses. Excellent.
yeah.
How can everyone listening today reach out to you if they want to have a conversation, maybe be a part of one of your pop-up empowerment groups?
Thank you so much for
Hmm.
offering. My website is Embrace Your Power Coaching. So
Okay.
it's www.embraceyourpowercoaching.
Okay.
And I recently launched my Instagram profile, my account in February. That was a
Okay.
big fear I had to overcome, and the
Yeah.
Loud Woman Nation was a part of that, me
Yeah.
overcoming that. And that handle, my name is at Bliss Soulful underscore living. So
Okay.
story for that. I wanted blissful living, it was taken.
Right.
But for soulful living, it was taken. So I
Okay.
combined them.
Okay.
Bliss, soulful living,
I
because
love
that's
it.
to me what's the ascension of the personal growth is to get to that space of bliss and just soulful living.
Yes.
So
Who doesn't
delicious.
want that all the time? On tap. On tap.
Right. Just right. Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've loved this conversation for so many reasons. Finding out that we have so much in common with our educational backgrounds,
Right.
and it just takes me back because I share with everyone my almost 20-year career
Mm-hmm.
working full time for
Mm-hmm.
higher ed. Um, it was amazing. It was an
Mm-hmm.
amazing learning experience trajectory that was was lifted by the mentorship of an incredible woman,
Yeah.
and I know that this doesn't happen for everybody. I'm really cognizant of the fact that I do feel it was a
Mm-hmm.
part of my dharma. She was
Yeah.
put on my path for a reason, and it was meant for me to have the experiences that I had and the opportunities that I had, but also to learn some of the lessons that she
Mm-hmm.
taught me as I learned how to become a leader. And this was her name, because some of you may hear this and go, I know who you're talking about. Yeah. Joyce Elam, the dean of the business school at FIU at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just phenomenal. She would sit me down and say, you need to speak up,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to learn how to let people go who are not doing their job. She helped mold me, and at the
Mm-hmm.
same time, when the timing was right, she would say, what do you want to do next? Write out the plan for me, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
help make it happen for you. So,
Wow.
someone who believes in you, someone who sees your
Mm-hmm.
gifts and talents,
Yes.
and is helping to mold you into the leader that
Mm-hmm.
you need to be. And so I'm so grateful for her and all the opportunities that I had at FIU, and I'm still working with them in a different
Uh-huh.
capacity, which is beautiful now as a coach, as a leadership coach on the other side.
Uh-huh.
But I love women raising women up, um,
Mm-hmm.
people raising people up, and we need more empowerment coaches out there. So thank you for all that you do. And I can't wait to see what you create
Yes.
and continue to be inspired to create. And we will, I'm sure, have another conversation soon, maybe about how do we transform education. I'm starting to think that I need to bring like a panel
Yeah.
of people together, of experts,
Mhm.
to really, just have dialogue around it and share that dialogue, because it's just not right
It's not.
anymore that we're still here today where the system is broken. Teachers are just suffering. The
Hmm.
students are suffering as well, and there has to be a solution, but we have to approach it differently. We have to have different conversations,
Right.
and make the time and space for it, and the resources, and bring the
Right.
resources to the table too.
Yeah.
So that would
Very
be
near and
a
dear
lovely
to my
conversation to have
that. And another topic that
another time.
I would love to explore further is the evolution of the woman.
Yeah.
Just because what I found last year was really embracing femininity, because dating, wanting to date.
Yes.
Because I find that many women have kind of given up on that.
Yeah. I have I love that conversation. I love that dialogue. I actually had a friend who was bugging me. She's like, you need to create a course on how to find a partner after divorce. And I'm like, you know, I'm still playing with it, right?
Hmm.
Because I do feel that it was a journey
Hmm.
and that I did learn a lot, and a big part of it was stepping into my feminine,
Yes.
embracing my feminine again in a
Hmm.
new way after all this time, and checking the mindset. What was I
Yeah.
saying to myself about what's possible, what isn't?
Oh my gosh.
You know,
Huge.
what I think about men, what I think about dating. And I really had
And
to
what
do
I think
a lot of
about my
inner work.
body.
What do I think about my body? Yes. Oh my
Yeah.
God, that's a huge one.
It,
And I had to make incredible shifts. I also had to let the other people tell me what they were seeing in me and accept it and
yeah.
believe it and be
Yeah.
gracious and go, thank you. Thank you for
Yeah.
seeing me that way. And thank you for, showing me a different side of me that I wasn't seeing.
Yes.
And so there's so much to it. I
I
can say that
agree.
I'm successfully on the other side of that
Mhm.
now in a beautiful, beautiful partnership and relationship, full of love, full of respect,
Mhm.
full of fun. And
Mhm.
it's possible. It
It
is
is. It is.
possible.
It
So
is.
yes, thank you for planting that seed. Let's see what podcast comes up next around this.
Okay. All right.
But for today, Janice, thank you. Thank you for being a guest. Thank you for sharing your story because so many women, right? Women's story, women's trajectory. This is a story of your trajectory,
Yes.
right? And all of the ways that we have to accept who we are and where we are at any given moment in our life and
Hmm.
be happy
Yeah.
and take the juice from that
Hmm.
lemon at that moment in time and allow life to speak to us, right?
Hmm.
And to show us
Hmm.
the way and
Yeah.
to trust and surrender. So thank you so much for modeling that for us today.
You're welcome. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for tuning in, whether you tuned in on YouTube or on audio. And I will see you next time on the next episode of the Fierce and Flowing podcast. Thank you.